Hey ghouls and gals, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor and today's video is going to be my bookshelf reorganization and bookshelf tour. Me and my partner just moved, and one of the benefits of moving was moving into a slightly larger space, one where I can have a reading room, a place where I can film, put all my bookshelves, and just relax at the end of the day. So one of my favorite things about our new place is this library room. I'm really excited. We're gonna go ahead, get started with the video. First is going to be kind of a time-lapse situation of me reorganizing my bookshelves, and then after that I'm going to do just like a quick little bookshelf tour. It's not going to be one where I pull out every single book on my shelves, but kind of talk you through how I organized my collection, how I'm setting up my books, just giving you an in-depth look at the finished product. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and get into it. Here is my brand new reading nook and my brand new library bookshelf setup for 2021. Alright, so shelf number one on the large bookshelf is just a bunch of childhood favorites. It's very chaotic, primarily because of my Redwall collection, because that series has had so many reprints and cover changes, not exactly cover changes, but just changes in format over the years. So I have quite a collection and it just makes the shelf look a little chaotic, but honestly, I don't mind that. Nothing much more to say about this shelf, just some childhood favorites. And I also have my DC Funko Pops up on top of the bookshelf as well. So moving on to the next one. Next up, we have a shelf that doesn't really have a theme. It's kind of a catch-all shelf. It's mostly YA fantasy and speculative fiction, but we do have some adult titles in there as well as graphic novel series. So primarily it's a bunch of fantasy that I really enjoy, and then also it's kind of blending a little bit into horror and darker fantasy, or even some contemporary on the end there with some darker elements, like My Best Friend's Exorcism and Plain Bad Heroines. Those aren't exactly fantasy, they're more horror, but they are some of my favorite books, and especially Plain Bad Heroines, which I have displayed out front. Yeah, it's just, they just looked nice together. I try and have some semblance of order on my bookshelf, but then it's also just like what series look good together, what books look good together, and also like what books fit on a shelf together. So there you have it, some horror, some fantasy, some speculative fiction. The First Sister I think is technically a space opera, but it's kind of all represented there. Not really too much of a theme, just some books that I really enjoy. Now, moving on to the third shelf, we have my fantasy favorites. And of course, I have 2 editions of the Poppy War series because that's my favorite series. I've also got my Marvel Funko Pops because I am just such a big Marvel fangirl. And I do have 2 editions of the Poppy War series. The series that is standing up on the middle of my bookshelf are the Illumicrate versions. It is so hard for me to figure out how to display these because every single part of these books are a masterpiece. They are signed by the author, which is exciting. But the hardcover itself is really beautiful naked. There's also art on the dust jacket. And on my last bookshelf, I did have the spines displayed out because the spines are very beautiful as well. Just as of right now, I just think they look a little bit better just having the spines sticking out. But that's probably something that I will be just moving around, or if I want to display a different part of those special editions. And then just also eventually I feel like this is gonna have to become a Samantha Shannon shelf because prior to the Orange Tree, we've got the Bone Season series. There's 4 books out right now, but it's gonna be 7 books. And of course, she is coming out with another book in the Prior of the Orange Tree world. and that one's going to be chunky as well. So I'm sure at some point soon she's gonna have her own shelf, and she's one of my favorite authors, so I would like that eventually. I would say that R.F. Kuang and Samantha Shannon are my favorite current authors at the moment, so they're gonna take up a lot of space on my favorite shelves. And then I do just have some adult, and I guess Girl Serpent Thorn is YA, but just some other fantasy that just fit really well on this shelf and then looked good with the other hardbacks on this shelf. Then next up we do have my horror slash science fiction shelf. I don't actually have a lot of science fiction. I mean, I do. We'll get to that shelf in a moment though, but this is just my shelf of horror that isn't, well, I mean, if I own a book, I do really like it, but like my best friend's Exorcism, Plain Bad Heroines, that's on a different shelf with some of my other all-time favorites, but these are all really solid horror books to me. Again, displaying my Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires because I think it's an absolutely gorgeous hardback book. This will, I'm gonna guess, become a horror only shelf very, very soon because, again, really only Jurassic Park, Persephone Station, and To Sleep in a Sea of Stars are really the only sci-fi books on this shelf. They just fit really well with the horror books. Not too much more to say about that. But I do actually like how this horror shelf isn't too dark. Horror tends to be very black and red heavy, so that's one of the reasons why I'm displaying the Southern Book Club's Guide out like that. It just adds some more color, and just it's a really cool graphic design to this shelf that I feel like might become pretty dull if it's just like all books with red and black elements to it. But yeah, that is my science fiction and horror shelf. Next up, we have my book of the month shelf, and this is a shelf that actually does have a little bit of space on the corner there for some more books because I do have quite a few book of the month books left to fit on the shelf. I just haven't read them yet, and they are in a separate to be read place. I do try and organize them by color of the book of the month logo on the spine. So in rainbow order from that book of the month logo. I know just from looking at the shelf at a glance, it doesn't look too organized whatsoever unless you're looking at those logos. I do tend to really like a bookshelf or a setup where it kind of does look like a library or a bookstore. Like it's slightly organized, but it's a little bit random as well. So I kind of tend to like my books looking a little bit disorganized, but also organized in their own way. And then, of course, I think the most quote-unquote disorganized shelf on my whole entire bookshelf at the moment is going to be this very last shelf here. We have some nonfiction books, and then we have some classic books. A lot of them are my school editions, classics that I wanted to keep around, and then also classics that just are very old. I really love a good beaten up book. So we end up having a shelf that has some very new nonfiction releases as well as just some very old vintage paperbacks that I really enjoy. So ideally someday these will be two different shelves, but I have the room just to fit them all on one, so that's what we're gonna do here. Again, this is a very chaotic shelf, but I kind of like how it looks, especially this corner. Over here, we've got some versions of Stephen King books that I just already have like a nice copy of, but I found these for like free or like 25 cents, something like that at a garage sale. It's Salem's Lot and The Stand, and I already have nice copies of both of those, but I just thought they looked really cool there. And then just some old paperbacks, and of course my really cool The Lord of the Rings series. It's like an older box set that I really enjoy. So yeah, that is this kind of catch-all shelf. It's not the most aesthetically pleasing, it's kind of wonky at the moment, but I just put it towards the bottom of the bookshelf. I don't really see it too often, but I do think all of these books look pretty nice together, a little chaotic, but nice as well. And then next up we have the half bookshelf, which is literally my Stephen King shelf. The man has over 70 books out now, and I definitely don't have all of them, but I do have a fair amount. These will be needing to go on a full-size bookshelf someday when I have all of his collection. I do have them in mostly publication order, with some exceptions that I will get into a little bit later. And also just sometimes I'll have to switch the books around in publication order just to make them fit and not leave any gaps in the bookshelf at this point in time. Some of my favorites on this shelf, I definitely love, like over here, we've got some very, very vintage and older looking books, which are a whole lot of fun. My favorite is probably this old version of The Shining. I absolutely love the naked hardback of this book. It's just the most beautiful retro green. I absolutely love that color, and I do think it fits the vibe of The Shining so well. I just really, really love that cover, so that's one that I'm very pleased with. We've also got like the Bachman books. I've noticed a lot of times it is easier to get the older Stephen King books in the book club size. Like this is a standard adult hardback. This is the book club size. If that bothers you, that's definitely something to look for when purchasing vintage Stephen Kings, because a lot of them, it is easier for whatever reason, at least that I've noticed, to buy the original versions of his older books in that smaller book club version. Moving down to the second shelf in the Stephen King shelf, I would say honestly this is probably my least favorite shelf when it comes to Stephen King. This era of Stephen King books are very, very hit or miss for me. Of course, 11/22/63 is one of my favorite Kings, but other than that, either I haven't read a lot on this shelf or they were just kind of so-so books for me. This font, this era of Stephen King books, I haven't had the best of luck with. Like out of these 4 books here, I didn't really care for Dreamcatcher. Cell was just okay. Everything's Eventual over here kind of has the same sort of vibe as these books, and that was again an okay installment. So yeah, just kind of a weird shelf just for the fact that I'd say this is the shelf I've read from the least, or just haven't enjoyed the books on the most. But I am really looking forward to reading, I know Lissy's Story and Doom McKee are some that I'm really looking forward to reading soon. And then the last of the Stephen King shelves slash these Dan Brown books that I'm just using to complete the shelf, fill it out a little bit. Again, this is the one that's least in publication order because I do have some smaller books here that just looked weird with the rest. The other two kind of look very cohesive with the adult standard hardcover books, and then it just would look weird to put like Elevation in with these, at least in my opinion. And then also the Dark Tower series I'm probably gonna have towards the end of my shelves as well, especially once I get more, just because they're published. The publication order, if I would put them in publication order with the rest of them, they'd be scattered, and I like having my series together. But yeah, and then same with the Mr. Mercedes series, I'm just keeping that together as much as possible because they didn't all come out at the same time. But again, I really like keeping series together, so that's kind of like my last Stephen King shelf. Again, these Dan Browns will move once I get a couple more Stephen King books. And as you can see, I don't have all of Stephen King books, but this bookshelf is pretty darn full already, so I will need to kind of turn this into a larger bookshelf at some point in my journey. So yeah, that's kind of an overview of my bookshelves. Again, I know a lot of people have like some more aesthetic shelves. Like I wish I were a person that could do rainbow shelves or color-coded shelves, or even like alphabetical shelves as well. I just think that genres and again, like a book of the month shelf, just for the most part, grouping them in genres works really, really well for me. So I'll probably continue to do that. It's what I've done all of my life with my books, and it's just a system that's not really a system, kind of more of a vibe that just works really, really well for me. Also, not technically a bookshelf, but this is a part of my reading room. So bookshelves are over here. And I have a book cart as well as my reading chair right here, but this does have some books on it. So this is my TBR section of physical books that I want to get to and prioritize soon, as well as It just has all of my journaling supplies on top, as well as just some stationery and things like that on the bottom. So I know a lot of people love these TBR cards. I do as well. I didn't want a full cart full of them because I don't actually like owning that many physical books that I haven't read yet. Really trying to work this year on just only holding on to books that I love, or even purchasing fewer books that I haven't read yet. And it's just a really cozy corner of the apartment, and I am just really, really excited to use it very often. And that is going to be it for this video. I was really, really excited to film this one. I had a lot of fun not only documenting the process for you, but for me as well, trying to figure out what configurations work for me, and then finally putting together a finished product that I was really proud of. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, let me know how you organize your books at home, and subscribe for more content from me. Stay safe, stay spooky, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye!